on the repatriation of Somali refugees from the Daadab camp to their country. So I have a small statement which I would like to read to you and for you to inform the world about the position of Kenya. For reason of pressing national security that speak to the safety of Kenyans in a context of terrorist and criminal activities, the government of the Republic of Kenya has commenced the exercise of closing the Daadab refugee complex. The refugees will be repatriated to their countries of origin or to third-party countries for resettlement. This decision was arrived at in November 2013 when Kenya, Somalia, and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees signed a tripartite agreement setting ground for repatriation of Somali refugees. There has been a very slow process on the implementation of this agreement. As part of concluding this arrangement, Kenya is committed to closing the Daadab refugee complex. This decision has been made by a government reflecting the fact that the camps have become hosting ground for Al-Shabaab as well as centers of smuggling and contraband trade, beside being enablers of illicit weapon proliferation. Considering the changing landscape of global terrorism, with the new terrorist entities seeking to root themselves in our region, it would be inexcusable for the Kenyan government to overlook its primary constitutional responsibility to protect our citizens and their property. Kenya is presently hosting over 600,000 refugees and has been doing so for a quarter of a century now. 25 years is defined as a whole generation. Refugee camps are not permanent settlement. They are not migration centers, and yet these seemed to be what refugee camps in Kenya have been turned into. Refugee camps are supposed to be temporary humanitarian remedy awaiting stabilization of countries which are unstable to stabilize. Many of you may recall we have hosted refugees from many other countries such as Uganda, Ethiopia, Burundi, DRC, South Sudan, and Somalia. Hosting of refugees has been costly for Kenya. As a country, we have been glad to help our neighbors and all those in need, sometimes at the expense of our security. There comes a time when we must think primarily about the security of our people. Ladies and gentlemen, that time is now. The camps are now completely overcrowded. They are built for far less numbers, and the international community has never moved to address this. The environmental impact has been disastrous for host communities. Today, we have to dig over 400 meters for water when it was less than 50 meters before the growth of these camps. What is worse is that Kenyans have to pay for water while refugees get it for free, not to mention the enormous economic cost to business in Kenya, furthered by the use of the camp as smuggling centers for contraband goods. Refugee camps have become centers of poaching, human trafficking, proliferation of small or illicit weapons, which compromises Kenya's international security rating. Ladies and gentlemen, we are aware that several large-scale attacks, such as the Westgate Shopping Mall attack, Garissa University attack, the Lamu attack, were planned and deployed from the Daadab refugee complex by a transnational terrorist group. Over the years, our security agencies have thwarted and continue to thwart numerous terrorist attempts besides recovering catches of arms, arresting several terrorists suspects from the Daadab refugee complex. For instance, those who kidnapped teacher Judy Mutoa in October last year planned and executed their plot at the Daadab refugee camp. As a result of insecurity created by the existence of refugee camp, Kenya suffers the brunt of negative consequences such as travel advisories, poor humanitarian rating, obvious negative consequences for our country economy. Some of these attacks were aimed, of course, at the interests of our international partners. Yet Kenya continues to bear the brunt of this attack on their behalf with negligible support from them. Looking ahead, our national security organs have observed that terrorist groups such as ISIS are looking to make inroads into our region. Elsewhere, ISIS has taken advantage of refugee inflows and processes to install its destructive cells, so much so that governments across Europe and Middle East have taken unprecedented effort to limit refugee inflows into their own countries on the ground of national security. Kenya cannot look aside and allow this threat to escalate any further. To kickstart the repatriation process and subsequent closure of the Daadab refugee complex, the government has availed with immediate effect $10 million as a part of putting in place a requisite technical infrastructure to oversee the repatriation process. The government has today gazetted a task force on the repatriation of refugees whose mandate will be to oversee, manage, expedite their repatriation and the closure of the Daadab refugee complex. Let me speak of the regional and global context to this issue. The decision to fast-track repatriation of refugees is anchored in the evolving understanding by virtually all regional and international bodies that Kenya faces a serious security threat. In the 590th meeting of the AAU Peace Security Council in April this year, the AAU recognized and acknowledged, and I quote, Kenya's legitimate security concern that the Daadab refugee camp has been infiltrated and become a hideout for Al-Shabaab terrorist group, which exploited the camp to plan and carry out attack against Kenya institutions and installation and civilian, unquote. It is important to note that AAU has also confirmed that Somalia is now safe, ready, and willing to receive our citizens. Furthermore, the Peace and Security Council stated AAU security stated, and I quote, shouldering the burden of refugees is the responsibility of the international community as a whole and not individual countries alone. The United Nations Security Council Resolution 1269, arrived at 2 years before 9/11, called on states to deny safe haven to those who plan, finance, commit acts of terrorism, and to refrain from granting refugee status to terrorists. A number of similar resolutions have been passed, and they are all amount to the international community profound understanding of security being the foundation of all other aspects of the public good. Kenya appreciates the national security interests that are forming how other countries are dealing with the challenges of refugee inflows. We are also seeking to anchor our humanitarian character, which is recognized all over the world, in consideration that we put the security of our country first. We will not be the first to do so. This is a standard practice worldwide. For example, in Europe, rich, prosperous, and democratic countries are turning away refugees from Syria, one of the worst war zones since World War II. What is unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen, has been the lack of commitment to the refugee repatriation we have been calling for. Refugees are a responsibility of the international community. The large amount of money pledged, especially during the Brussels conference, for their help should be devoted to helping them resettle back home. They too have a right and obligation to contribute to the political and economic development of their country. To make the matter more serious, Kenyans in AMISOM have shed blood to liberate first part of Somalia from Al-Shabaab. That sacrifice cannot be in vain. Finally, the government shall be putting out a timetable for the execution of the repatriating process once the task force presents its report to me, which should be ready before 31st of May. I thank you.
What are the timelines of the repatriation program? And why not Kakuma? And the refugees are going to go back to the country. Or rather, if Somalia are going to take them back, Somalia takes for their going back.
Well, I want to begin with the first question. The timetable for repatriation will, the task force which is behind me here, which has just been gazetted today, they will present the timetable based on all the resources required, where the refugees will go. Of course, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, both on the Kenyan side and on the Somali side. Since this process has begun, in fact, when the tripartite agreement was signed, so immediately I'm given this, and the process will commence. So we see this process should be end hopefully by the end of the year. And why not Kakuma? We are saying we are closing the Daadab complex based on security concerns. And so at the moment, we have no problem in the Kakuma refugee camp. And your last question was? No country will refuse to take it to our own citizens, so why don't you ask them?
Robert McGuinness, Mr. Minister, I just want to now turn to your last point where you gave as an example of restricting from Syrian refugees. In that regard, do you then think that it's unfair for the international community to press the finger to remain within the camp, get the treatment of other refugees, has also been called to question in certain as well?
When if you had followed my statement very keenly, I said Kenya has been host to many refugees from many countries for many years, particularly the Somali refugees that have been in this country for more than a quarter of a century, beginning late 1991, and we have always been on our own on this with very minimal support from the international community. And therefore we are seeing that, and since the process had begun in November 2013, we don't see why we delay in this repatriation. So your question is really, I don't want to talk about what is happening in Europe. I think I'm talking about what we need to do based on the agreement, the tripartite agreement. And this repatriation should actually begin. This team is just going to work out on the timetable, the resources required, and the Kenya government had already put, in fact, $10 million immediately so that this process can start. So let me take this opportunity to thank all of you once again for this opportunity, and let us take positively on this and look forward to a very peaceful resettlement of the refugees in their own country. Thank you very much and good afternoon.